We have strayed into the gas tax.
Is it the gas tax or to the,
You can address,
or the question that was asked last week? Or the
you can
question-
certainly address the discrepancy between what West Pasco motorists pay and those in the east.
Yeah, I think that what Bob is suggesting here, that maybe the county could get involved in setting prices for gas evenly across the county. I find that almost amusing for the county to be involved in that. I do not at this time support a gas tax, but at the same time, I am not taking it off of the table. I have not been at those negotiating tables, and when I negotiate, I want to do it fairly, and I don't want things being taken off the table before I get there. So if it's a combination between gas tax and ad valorem tax, whatever it takes, we need to get to the place where we can maintain our badly maintained roads in Pasco County.
Mr. Moore, regarding the discrepancy in what folks pay east and west of Pasco.
Yeah, I think in reference to what Mr. Roberts was talking about, that's something that would have to be referred to either Adam Putnam or the Attorney General Pam Bondi if we think there's price gouging when it comes to gas prices in the county. That would not be a county commission issue. As it referring back to the gas tax, I've said this from the beginning, I'm not for the gas tax. I'm not for a 5-cent increase, I'm not for a 1-cent increase, I'm not for a 2-cent increase. I'm not for increasing the gas tax. It's that simple.
Would you care to elaborate, Mr. Robertson?
Well, I'll take 30 seconds.
All right.
Absolutely, I am not suggesting that the county commissioner should be in the business of setting prices. I'm not sure how Ken got that. I hope you didn't get that, but if you did, I want to make that clear. My point was simply this. As we wring our hands and wrestle over whether or not to have a 5-cent increase in tax, my point is that we have such a broader discrepancy in what we're already paying that is probably a more significant issue at the end of the day.
Okay, back to you, Mr. Littlefield. While we're on the topic of the gas tax, the commissioners right now for this upcoming budget considering a combination of the gas tax and property tax to pay for road construction and maintenance in the county. But why just consider gas and property tax? Would you consider possibly raising the mobility fees to finance the roads?
I have always been under the assumption that growth needs to pay for itself, and I have maintained that for all of the years that I have been in public office. And I will just leave it at there and let you interpret what that means when it comes to this subject. I believe that growth has to pay for itself, and if mobility fees has to increase to do that, I would be in favor of that.
Mr. Moore?
So we have two things that are being discussed when it comes to funding roads. I think what you're referring to, one is the gas tax and one is the transportation millage. I'm against the gas tax and I'm against the transportation millage. I'm against both of them. In my opinion, similar to what Mr. Littlefield says, growth will pay for things, but not sticking on the mobility fee. Growth will pay for things when we help the tax base by bringing more high-paying, secure jobs to Pasco County. We do things more organically than, again, asking people for more money. The county consistently talks and tries to suggest, let's raise this tax, let's raise that tax. Stop talking about raising taxes all the time. Let's talk about bringing more jobs here to start paying for things. Let's bring the tax base that way. That will help pay for our roads. In addition, something else we can look at is there's a lot of projects that are sitting still right now. Why don't we look at some of those funds, from some of those reserves from those projects that may not happen for 10 or 20 years? We can borrow from there. To maintain our roads. Thank you.
Mr. Robertson?
When a candidate sits here and tells you that he's not going to support any tax increase, I respect that. But you have to know that there's another side to that coin. Our sheriff has presented the staff with a request for an additional $6 million in budget to to pay for salaries because he is losing people to Pinellas and Hillsborough because they're paying signing bonuses and taking our deputies away from us. So if we are not going to pay for that way, then I think we need to know how the candidate would suggest that we pay for the request that the sheriff has, if he's going to support that increase at all. The mobility fee is not an issue here because what we're really talking about with the issue of repairs and maintenance are two existing roads. That's why we're talking about the gas tax. That's why we're talking about a transportation equivalent millage. I would lean towards a gas tax because everybody pays that uses the roads.
Mr. Littlefield, your rebuttal?
We're good.
All right, Mr. Moore, as long as we're talking about mobility fees, many of your constituents who will be voting in the primary are predisposed to believe the worst about the United Nations Agenda 21, including that carrying it out means violation of United States sovereignty. Among other things, they are keenly suspicious of policies such as mobility fees, in which Pasco is an active participant, that penalize people who live or create businesses outside zones recommended by government. Describe how you would balance your worried constituents' concerns against the bipartisan consensus that growth should pay for itself, partly through mobility fees.
Anytime the United Nations makes a suggestion, we follow it out of concerns. You're talking about Agenda 21, and I think part of that is what's called smart growth. I think that meeting was held, if I'm not correct, in South America, where they came up with that idea of smart growth in Agenda 21. Referring to the mobility fees, here's some of my concerns about that. I've heard from people, in certain parts of the county that they consider them urban, but other people consider them rural, and we have the county making that decision. Would I reverse it? That's again, we're going back to, I've had lots of discussions with different people throughout the county. I will continue to have those discussions to make sure those areas are divided up properly. That probably would not have been something that I would have personally promoted or passed while I was on the commission. There's something called muttering, if we're familiar with muttering. And that's something else the county is getting more and more involved with, which is trying to dictate where people should build in the county and dictate where growth should happen. And I think that's something we need to take a very, very close eye on and keep an eye on right now, because in my opinion, the market dictates where builders should build, where developers should develop. They're the professionals of this. They're making their investment. They're the ones looking for a return on their investment. And now we have the county going to push the mutter, and they're going to push it more and more, and they're going to penalize these builders and developers if they don't follow through with what they want to enact.
Mr. Robertson.
First of all, the whole concept of us subjugating ourselves to the United Nations and what they want to do is a bad, bad plan from the get-go. How it is being manifest right now in Pasco County, as Mike alludes to, is with this development concept where you incentivize development in what is previously determined to be urbanized areas. That concept is an interesting concept, but I don't necessarily believe that it plays out the way we'd like it to in Pasco County, because we don't have the economic development base to be able to go with that kind of incentivized housing development. And even as we've seen in a recent commission meeting, we had a serious disagreement between two of our commissioners as to what staff's identification was of a particular area, whether it was urban, suburban, or rural. So until we can get through those hurdles, that's an area that we need to push the pause button on.
Mr. Littlefield.
Thanks, sir. It has come down to a discussion of Agenda 21 here, which talks about the sustainability of just about everything. Common Core is a part of Agenda 21. But the subject matter here is the mobility fees, which goes into my policy that, and the builders and the developers have already agreed that those could be more than doubled, and they would be happy with it. And I'm surprised that Mr. Moore, who is strongly supported by the developers, the big landowners, the engineers, and all of those that go along with that, suggesting that he does not agree with that when they are pushing it. It is one way that growth can pay for itself.
Mr. Moore, 30 seconds.
Yeah, and I actually talk to quite a few of them on a regular basis, and it's not that they're for doubling it. That cost will be pushed back onto the consumer. So you may have talked to a couple of people that say they're for it. The more you have talked to, they would not want to double those fees. Again, going back to what you spoke of about Agenda 21 and smart growth, you know, once you have somebody like the United Nations dipping into Pasco County, you know, I'm not a fan of that. And oh, thank you very much.
Okay. Mr. Robertson, there's been a lot of talk recently on how to redevelop US 19, particularly since the Smart Growth Grant. Pasco is just one of 18 cities across the country to receive that. What do you think is needed to help kickstart that redevelopment?
United Nations of Pasco County.
All you have to do is drive up and down US 19, and you get an idea that any one solution is not going to be the only solution to address what's going on here. This West Market redevelopment program is a place where the conversation can begin. But really, ultimately, what we need to look at is redevelopment and utilization of the space that we have, particularly, I think, giving a nod to what's been happening with Pasco Economic Development Council. One of the things that they've done most recently here in the Newport Richey area is to open a business incubator, which is, for those that are not familiar, is a concept where you can take small businesses, oftentimes, many times previously home-based businesses, and create an environment where they can come together and benefit both from each other, but then also from additional input for marketing, accounting, all the things that some entrepreneurs may not necessarily be good at. So I think that as we look going forward, we need to take a look at some of the tools that we've already got right here and look at how we can expand upon those to draw additional attention and additional economic development into that corridor.
Mr. Littlefield?
This problem of 19 has taken a generation to create, and it's going to take a very long time to undo that. I think the County Commission has to be the catalyst in this. Grandfather businesses in, begin passing ordinances that stop the blight. When those businesses go out of business that have been grandfathered, or that property sold that has been grandfathered, then the new ordinances that have been passed kick in. And then you say, well, hey, nobody will want that property. Well, you offer them incentives to come in, to buy the property, offer them incentives to put in a business that falls within the guidelines of the new ordinances.
Mr. Moore?
You mind repeating that question?
There's been a lot of talk about redevelopment on US 19. How would you kickstart that?
Okay, great, thanks. Well, one thing I think we need to do is look at code enforcement, and I know that I've looked at the current county budget, and they're pushing that a little harder when it comes to code enforcement, and the sheriff also has talked about having some volunteers up with code enforcement. You drive up 19 any day of the week, you know what you see. You're looking at drug dealers, you're looking at a lot of homeless people, you're looking at panhandlers, you're looking at other folks walking up and down the street. We've got a lot of roach motels. I would consider them roach motels, where obviously people hang out that are dealing drugs and committing crimes. And it's going to come down to the point of who wants to be there, who wants to move, who wants to start a business next to a business like that. And code enforcement needs to come into play. They need to step it up a notch. We need to look at technology for our code enforcement officers. We also need to look at, obviously, providing the resources the Sheriff's Department needs to get rid of a lot of the crime in the area. When it comes to economic development, we also need to look at, we talked about some of these dollars that are coming from the penny from Pasco. Let's push some of those dollars into 19 and working on the economic development of 19. Thank you.
Mr. Robertson?